Picture a locked door, not just any door, but one that stood closed for thousands of years. Behind it, the voices of entire civilizations, their stories, their wisdom, their very existence, all trapped in symbols we can see but cannot yet understand. Across the globe, scattered in crumbling ruins, etched into weathered stone, or hidden in long-forgotten manuscripts, lie 30 ancient scripts that have defied every attempt to crack their codes. These aren't just puzzles, they're time capsules waiting to spill secrets that could shatter our understanding of history. What if one of these scripts holds the key to a lost empire's downfall? Or the untold origins of a modern language? Or worse, what if we're overlooking a message meant to warn us about something buried deep in our past? The truth is, every undeciphered script is more than a linguistic challenge. It's a whisper from the shadows of time. Take the Voynich manuscript, a book filled with bizarre illustrations and text that's resisted over a century of analysis. Or Rongorongo, the enigmatic glyphs of Easter Island that might hold the islanders' tragic fate. And then there's the Indus Valley Script, a 4,000-year-old mystery tied to one of humanity's first urban cultures. What's chilling isn't just that we can't read them, it's that these scripts were once as familiar as street signs to the people who wrote them. Their knowledge, their daily lives, even their warnings, all slipped into silence. This journey isn't just for scholars or treasure hunters. It's for anyone who's ever felt that pull of the unknown, the thrill of standing at the edge of a mystery and peering into the dark. Because decoding even one of these scripts could rewrite entire chapters of our past. Imagine uncovering a lost philosophy that changes how we see the world, or finding a king's name that reshapes the timeline of an ancient war. That's the power hidden in these 30 scripts. So let's begin not just to list them, but to step into the shoes of the detectives who have spent lifetimes chasing these ghosts. The door is right there. All we have to do is find the key. Baked into the bricks and seals of what's now Pakistan and northwest India, the Indus Valley Script taunts us with its crisp, geometric precision. These symbols, ranging from simple fish shapes to intricate ladder-like designs, were etched into clay tablets and stamped seals over 4,000 years ago by one of humanity's first urban civilizations. But here's the haunting part. We've unearthed thousands of these inscriptions, some no longer than a grocery list, and yet not a single Rosetta Stone-style bilingual text has ever been found. Without that crucial key, the script remains a locked vault. What makes this puzzle even thornier is the debate over whether these symbols constitute a full language or something more primal. Some scholars argue the brevity of inscriptions, averaging just 5 signs, suggests proto-writing, like an early accounting system. Others point to the script's consistent directionality and symbol combinations as hallmarks of a true language. The truth, we're essentially trying to reconstruct an entire civilization's voice from fragments shorter than a tweet. But modern technology is throwing the script a lifeline. Artificial intelligence has begun scouring these symbols for hidden patterns, treating them like a cryptographic puzzle. Computational linguists feed the script into algorithms designed to detect grammatical structures, while other teams cross-reference it with ancient scripts from Mesopotamia or even later Indian writing systems. One breakthrough came when AI identified potential syntax rules, hinting that these symbols might indeed follow linguistic logic. Yet for all our silicon brainpower, the script clings to its secrets, perhaps because we're missing something fundamental about how these people saw their own world. Imagine standing before a seal carved with an eerie, horned figure surrounded by those cryptic signs. That image, part deity, part beast, could hold the missing context. Because scripts aren't just about symbols, they're about the minds that created them. Until we bridge that gap between their worldview and ours, the Indus Valley Script remains a conversation half heard through a thick stone wall. Now picture an island so remote it's one of the most isolated places on Earth, Easter Island, a speck of land in the vast Pacific. Here, among the silent moai statues, another mystery lingers: Rongorongo, a script carved into wooden tablets with symbols so strange they seem to dance across the surface. These glyphs, a chaotic mix of human figures, animals, and abstract shapes, are the only known indigenous writing system in all of Oceania. But here's the gut-wrenching twist. By the time Europeans arrived in the 18th century, the islanders themselves had forgotten how to read it. The very people who created these intricate carvings could no longer understand their own ancestors' words. What makes Rongorongo especially eerie is its possible link to the island's infamous collapse. Some researchers believe the script wasn't just decorative, it might have been a last-ditch effort to record sacred knowledge as deforestation and warfare pushed the society to the brink. Imagine scribes carving frantic messages onto wood as their world unraveled around them. Others argue the script was always ceremonial, a visual language tied to rituals rather than daily life. But the truth might be even darker. When slave raids and disease decimated the population in the 19th century, the last keepers of Rongorongo's meaning likely died without passing it on. What was lost wasn't just writing, it was an entire cultural memory. Deciphering Rongorongo feels like chasing smoke. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, there's no bilingual text to crack the code. Unlike the Indus Valley Script, we don't even know if these glyphs represent sounds, words, or entire ideas. Some symbols vaguely resemble plants and animals from the island, suggesting a pictorial basis. Others repeat in patterns that hint at a grammatical structure. But the real frustration: the few surviving tablets are scattered across museums worldwide, and many were burned or repurposed as firewood by missionaries. What remains is a puzzle with half the pieces missing, written in a language no living person speaks. Yet there's a haunting beauty in these failures. Rongorongo isn't just a linguistic challenge, it's a mirror reflecting how easily knowledge can vanish. The islanders who carved these glyphs likely never imagined their descendants would stare at them in silence. And that's the heart of the mystery. Not just what the script says, but why it was so fragile. Was it too complex, too tied to a priesthood that disappeared? Or did its meaning die with the last elder who understood its power? Every stroke of those glyphs is a reminder: writing isn't immortal. It only lasts as long as someone remembers how to read it. Deep in the labyrinthine ruins of Crete's Minoan palaces lies a script that taunts linguists with its elegant, flowing lines, Linear A. Unlike its cousin Linear B, which was cracked in the 1950s to reveal early Greek, this older script remains stubbornly silent. Etched onto clay tablets around 4,000 years ago, these symbols weren't just scribbles. They were the bureaucratic backbone of Europe's first advanced civilization, tracking everything from temple offerings to shipments of olive oil. But here's what chills the bones. We can recognize the numbers and some logograms, even guess that it records transactions, yet the language itself, gone. As if the Minoans deliberately wrapped their words in a shroud before vanishing into myth. The frustration runs deeper than mere symbols. Linear A doesn't fit neatly into any known language family, not Greek, not Hittite, nothing. Some argue it's a lost branch of the Luwian languages spoken in ancient Anatolia. Others whisper it could represent a pre-Indo-European tongue, a linguistic relic from a time before waves of migration reshaped the Mediterranean. What's certain is this: Deciphering it would crack open a window onto a world that inspired Plato's Atlantis legends. The Minoans built palaces without fortifications, worshipped snake goddesses, and painted frescoes of leaping dolphins, all while their script recorded a society that thrived centuries before the Parthenon. Then there's the Phaistos Disc, a clay enigma that might be Linear A's wild cousin. Found in the ruins of Phaistos' palace, this fist-sized disc bears 45 unique symbols stamped in spirals, like a proto-typewriter experiment. Is it a hymn, a treaty, a board game? The symbols share a stylistic flair with Linear but defy direct comparison. Some theorists insist it's a hoax, while others see it as evidence of a wider, lost writing system. Either way, the disc amplifies the central mystery. The Minoans clearly communicated complex ideas, but their voice reaches us as a muffled echo. Modern efforts to decipher Linear blend high-tech and sheer ingenuity. Computational models analyze symbol frequencies, hunting for grammatical patterns. Linguists compare it to the few known fragments of Eteocretan, a later language from Crete that might be its descendant. Yet progress crawls partly because the surviving tablets are overwhelmingly administrative, devoid of poetry or names that could anchor meaning. Imagine trying to reconstruct English solely from Walmart receipts. Until we find a bilingual text or a royal proclamation, Linear remains a locked door, and behind it, not just words, but the heartbeat of a culture that shaped the ancient Mediterranean before mysteriously collapsing. Their script isn't just a puzzle. It's the last whisper of a civilization that defies even its own echoes. Buried beneath the dust of what's now southwestern Iran lies a script that predates even the earliest forms of cuneiform Proto-Elamite, a cryptic writing system etched onto clay tablets around 5,000 years ago. These aren't just ancient receipts. They're the earliest evidence of complex administration in the Near East, older than the pyramids of Egypt. Yet despite over a century of study, the script's language remains a linguistic black hole. We can parse its numerical notation, clear clusters of circles and wedges tracking quantities of grain or livestock, but the accompanying signs, those stubborn symbols, refuse to whisper their secrets. What makes Proto-Elamite especially tantalizing is its possible connection to the Proto-Dravidian languages, a family now spoken primarily in southern India. Some linguists spot eerie similarities between Proto-Elamite signs and later Indus Valley symbols, hinting at a vast, forgotten cultural exchange stretching from Mesopotamia to the Indus River. Imagine a world where traders from Iran and India shared not just goods but writing systems, their scribes borrowing and adapting symbols across thousands of miles. If deciphered, this script could rewrite the story of how writing itself spread not as a single invention, but as a web of intertwined ideas. But the real frustration lies in the tablet's content. Unlike royal decrees or epic poetry, these are dry economic records, lists of sheep, rations of barley, inventories of textiles. That mundanity is precisely what makes them so valuable. These tablets could map the trade routes of the ancient Near East, revealing how copper from Oman or lapis lazuli from Afghanistan flowed into Elamite cities. One tablet might record a merchant's debt, another the wages paid to laborers. Yet without understanding the underlying language, we're left with spreadsheets full of numbers and gibberish headings, a ledger with no key. Modern efforts to crack Proto-Elamite involve everything from 3D scanning to artificial intelligence. Researchers use spectral imaging to detect faded signs, while algorithms analyze stroke patterns for hidden consistencies. Some even speculate that the script's abrupt disappearance around 2800 BC wasn't an extinction but a metamorphosis, that its symbols evolved into the later linear Elamite script, which itself remains only partially deciphered. But until we bridge that gap, Proto-Elamite stands as a silent witness to a pivotal moment in human history: the birth of bureaucracy, the dawn of record-keeping, and the first flicker of a system that would eventually give us everything from tax forms to epic literature. The scribes who pressed those strokes into clay never imagined their work would become a time capsule, one we're still struggling to pry open. Long before cuneiform or hieroglyphs emerged, the banks of the Danube River bore witness to strange markings, the Inca symbols, scratched onto pottery and figurines by Neolithic farmers over 7,000 years ago. These enigmatic signs, discovered in modern-day Serbia and Romania, range from simple crosses and zigzags to more complex arrangements resembling plant stalks or branching patterns. At first glance, they might seem like decorative flourishes, but the startling regularity of these symbols across hundreds of artifacts has sparked a fiery debate. Were the Inca people doodling, or did they invent Europe's first writing system? What makes the Inca symbols so contentious is their eerie resemblance to later scripts. Some signs bear a striking similarity to early Sumerian cuneiform and even Minoan Linear A, though separated by millennia and continents. A few researchers, like the controversial archaeologist Marija Gimbutas, argued these symbols represented a sacred, Old European script tied to goddess worship. Others dismissed this as wishful thinking, pointing out that true writing requires consistent representation of language, not just repeated motifs. Imagine finding a modern child's drawing of a sun next to an ancient solar symbol and declaring them part of the same system. That's the tightrope scholars walk with Inca, distinguishing meaningful communication from cultural coincidence. The core challenge lies in the artifacts themselves. Unlike administrative tablets or royal decrees, Inca symbols appear on everyday objects, spindle walls, altars, and votive figurines. Some cluster in sequences that suggest intentional grouping, while others stand alone like ownership marks. One particularly haunting example is the Tartaria Tablets, 3 clay pieces unearthed in Romania, bearing symbols alongside what appears to be a ritual scene. Were these ancient prayers, property labels, or simply the Neolithic equivalent of "Bob was here," carved into a cave wall, without context, like a bilingual text, or a clear evolution into later writing? The symbols remain trapped in speculation. Modern research has turned to statistical analysis, hunting for patterns in symbol frequency and placement that might hint at linguistic structure. Some studies suggest certain signs recur in predictable combinations, much like prefixes or suffixes in language. Yet even if the Inca people were experimenting with proto-writing, they may have hit a cultural dead end. Around 4500 BC, their settlements declined, and the symbols vanished from the archaeological record. Did war, climate change, or migration snuff out Europe's first flirtation with writing? Or were these marks always meant to be something more ephemeral, a sacred shorthand understood only by initiates? The Inca symbols force us to confront a deeper question. Where do we draw the line between decoration and language? The Indus Valley Script and Linear at least appear alongside complex urban societies with clear needs for record-keeping. But the Inca culture was Neolithic farmers and herders without palaces or tax rolls. If this was writing, who were they writing for? The gods themselves, or future archaeologists who would spend centuries arguing over squiggles in clay? Until we find a Rosetta Stone hidden in the Balkan soil, these symbols remain a tantalizing what if, a reminder that humanity's urge to mark meaning onto the world is as old as civilization itself. Amid the sun-baked ruins of Bronze Age Crete, alongside the better-known Linear script, lurks another enigma, Cretan hieroglyphs. These intricate symbols, carved into seals and clay tablets around 4,000 years ago, present a visual paradox. Some signs resemble everyday objects, ox heads, daggers, fish, while others twist into abstract shapes that defy modern eyes. What's haunting is their coexistence with linear A. The same Minoan scribes likely used both systems, switching between them like we might toggle between typing and emojis. But while linear A feels bureaucratic, these hieroglyphs drip with ceremonial weight. Picture a seal stamped onto a temple offering. Its symbols not just recording a transaction, but invoking divine favor. Yet without a bilingual text or clear evolution into later scripts, they remain as cryptic as the rituals they once adorned. Now shift eastward to Cyprus, where a descendant of these scripts took root, cypro-minoan. Emerging around 1500 BC, this script borrowed Minoan symbols, but twisted them into something new, like a dialect evolving across the sea. The similarities tease linguists. A handful of signs resemble linear A, suggesting a shared linguistic ancestry. But here's the catch: cypro-minoan wasn't just a carbon copy. Its symbols simplified, adapted to local needs, and spread across Cyprus in a way Cretan hieroglyphs never did. Imagine a game of telephone spanning generations. The original Minoan message distorted by time, distance, and foreign tongues. The isolation of these scripts deepens the mystery. Cretan hieroglyphs flourished almost exclusively in central Crete, while cypro-minoan's few hundred inscriptions scatter thinly across Cyprus. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were used for millennia with consistent rules, these systems flickered briefly before vanishing. Some scholars argue their limited geographic range stunted their development. Others believe they were elite codes, understood only by scribes and priests. The truth might be stranger. These scripts could represent failed experiments in writing, like sparks that flared brightly but never caught fire. Decipherment efforts face a unique hurdle: partial overlap. A few cypro-minoan signs later reappear in Cypriot syllabic script, which was used to write Greek centuries later. This tenuous thread offers hope, like finding a single familiar word in an otherwise foreign poem. But without more texts or a bilingual inscription, progress crawls. Computational analysis tries to map symbol frequencies, hunting for prefixes or suffixes, while epigraphers painstakingly compare stroke patterns across clay fragments. The frustration is palpable. These scripts aren't completely alien, yet they remain just out of reach, like hearing a conversation through a closed door. What lingers is the cultural chasm these scripts bridge and blur. Cretan hieroglyphs and cypro-minoan weren't dead ends. They were stepping stones in the messy, nonlinear evolution of writing. Each symbol carved into clay was a gamble, a bid to pin meaning to form. That some succeeded while others faded into obscurity isn't just a linguistic curiosity. It's a reminder that history isn't written by the victors alone. Sometimes it's whispered by the scripts that nearly made it. Buried in the swampy lowlands of Mexico's Veracruz state lies a relic that could rewrite the history of the Americas, the Cascadal block. This serpentine slab, roughly the size of a laptop, bears 62 glyphs arranged in neat rows, their curves and lines echoing the artistic flair of the Olmec civilization. Dated to around 900 BC, this palm-sized tablet isn't just a curiosity, it's a potential bombshell. If confirmed as writing, it would push back the origins of Mesoamerican script by centuries, proving that the Olmec, the so-called mother culture of the region, were experimenting with written language long before the Mayas' intricate glyphs appeared. Yet the Cascadal block is a tease. Unlike the Mayas' sprawling stelae or the Zapotec's temple inscriptions, it stands alone, a single page ripped from a lost library. The symbols themselves are a mix of the familiar and the alien. Some resemble maize plants or insects, motifs central to Olmec cosmology, while others twist into abstract shapes that defy interpretation. What's maddening isn't just the brevity of the text, but its isolation. Imagine finding a single sentence in an unknown language with no dictionary, no related texts, and no living speakers to guide you. That's the wall researchers face. Without more samples, the cascadal block could be anything: a royal decree, a trader's inventory, or even a child's practice slate. The Olmec script's elusiveness cuts deeper when you consider their influence. This civilization carved colossal stone heads, pioneered rubber production, and built the first pyramids in Mesoamerica. Their art and iconography seeped into every culture that followed, from the Maya to the Aztecs. If they had writing, why haven't we found more of it? One theory suggests the Olmec wrote on perishable materials, bark, paper, or deerskin, that rotted in the humid jungle. Another hints that later cultures might have actively destroyed Olmec texts, erasing their predecessors' legacy to cement their own power. The chilling possibility: we're staring at fragments of a system so sophisticated that its very scarcity hints at a darker truth, the deliberate silencing of a civilization's voice. Modern efforts to crack the code rely on painstaking comparisons. Some glyphs recur in later Isthmian script, a still undeciphered system used centuries after the Olmec decline. Others mirror symbols found on Olmec pottery or jade figurines, suggesting a visual shorthand tied to ritual. But here's the rub: without a bilingual text or a lengthy inscription showing grammatical patterns, even the most advanced algorithms hit dead ends. The cascadal block might as well be a Rosetta Stone with half its text scraped away, a clue that dangles answers just out of reach. What lingers is the haunting legacy of the Olmec silence. If they did invent writing in the Americas, their system didn't just vanish, it was the spark that ignited 1,000 years of Mesoamerican literacy. Yet for all their influence, the Olmec themselves remain mute, their words trapped in stone. Every stroke on the cascadal block is a whisper from a world that shaped continents, but left no chronicles. And that's the heart of the mystery, not just deciphering the glyphs, but understanding why a culture so monumental chose, or was forced, to hide its own story. High in the Balkan mountains of Bulgaria, a weathered rock face bears marks that have fueled debate for decades: the Citovo inscription. Carved into sandstone with deliberate strokes, these 21 symbols resemble neither Greek nor Latin, nor any known script from the ancient world. Some signs look like elongated runes, others like geometric abstractions of trees or weapons. Discovered in 1928 near a Thracian settlement, the inscription's origins are murky at best. Local legends claim it's a message from the gods, while fringe theorists argue it's evidence of extraterrestrial contact. But strip away the wild speculation, and you're left with a genuine enigma, a script that defies classification, possibly tied to the shadowy Paleo-Balkan cultures that thrived here before Rome's conquest. The Thracian angle holds weight. This was their heartland after all. The Thracians, a warrior people who rivaled the Greeks in cultural complexity, left behind stunning goldwork and tomb murals. But almost no writing. That absence makes the Citovo inscription tantalizing. Could this be a rare surviving example of their script? Some scholars cautiously note similarities to Linear A's angular forms, or even early Germanic runes, though separated by centuries. Others dismiss it as medieval graffiti or a natural rock formation. The truth might lie in between, a votive carving by a Thracian priest, an offshoot of a lost writing system that never fully developed. Then there's the more outlandish speculation. The inscription's apparent isolation, no other texts like it found nearby, has fed theories ranging from Proto-Slavic secret codes to messages from advanced prehistoric civilizations. One particularly persistent myth ties it to the Dachshund runes, a hypothetical script Romanian nationalists once claimed predated Latin. Modern epigraphers roll their eyes at such claims, but the damage is done. The Citovo inscription has become a Rorschach test for ideological fantasies. What's lost in the noise is the real puzzle. If this isn't random scratching, who carved it, and why in such a remote location? Scientific analysis offers slim but crucial clues. The symbols show no weathering patterns consistent with natural erosion. Their edges are too sharp, their depths too uniform. Spectroscopy confirms the grooves were made by metal tools, likely iron chisels. Yet carbon dating is impossible here. The rock itself is millions of years old. The script's orientation vertical, reading top to bottom, hints at ceremonial use, unlike horizontal administrative texts. One compelling theory suggests it marked a sacred site, perhaps a boundary between the living world and the realm of Thracian gods like Zalmoxis. Imagine a pilgrim carving prayers into stone, believing the very act of inscription could bridge worlds. Today, the inscription faces a double threat: erosion from acidic rain and damage from amateur investigators, who have rubbed chalk into the grooves to make photos more dramatic. Archaeologists plead for restraint, knowing this could be our only window into a lost linguistic tradition. Meanwhile, our analysis quietly churns in the background, comparing the symbols to every known ancient script in search of a match. So far, silence. Perhaps the answer isn't in grand theories, but in the quiet persistence of epigraphy letter by letter, stroke by stroke. Until then, the Citovo inscription remains a whisper in stone, daring us to listen harder. Dredged from the depths of Greece's Lake Castoria, the Dispilio Tablet lies at the crossroads of archaeology's greatest debates. This wooden slab, carbon dated to around 5200 BC, bears a series of angular symbols that seem too deliberate to be random scratches. Unearthed in the ruins of a Neolithic lakeside village, it predates the Sumerian cuneiform by over 2 millennia, yet its true purpose remains shrouded in controversy. Are these Europe's first attempts at writing, or simply ritual marks left by farmers who never imagined future scholars would scrutinize their etchings? What makes the tablet especially haunting isn't just its age, but its fragility. Wood decays, leaving us with only a whisper of what might have been a thriving symbolic system. The symbols themselves are deceptively simple straight lines, crosses and branching patterns arranged in rows. Some resemble livestock tally marks, while others echo later Minoan hieroglyphs. But herein lies the existential dilemma for linguists. Where do we draw the line between proto-writing and decoration? The Inca symbols sparked similar debates, but Dispilio's context adds fuel to the fire. Found near remains of stilts that once supported lake dwellings, the tablet suggests a society complex enough to need record-keeping, whether for grain storage, lunar cycles, or sacred rites. One particularly chilling theory posits that the symbols weren't just utilitarian but apocalyptic, a warning system for environmental shifts, carved by villagers watching their world flood. Preservation is the silent villain in this mystery. Unlike clay tablets baked hard by time, organic materials like wood rarely survive the ages. The Dispilio tablet only endured because waterlogged conditions starved it of oxygen, preventing rot. This fluke of conservation raises a troubling question. How many other wooden texts have turned to dust, erasing entire chapters of Neolithic innovation? Imagine a library of such tablets, now dissolved into mud, a lost linguistic tradition will never reconstruct. Even the surviving artifact is fragile. When first exposed to air, it required immediate chemical treatment to avoid disintegration. The irony is cruel. The very material that made it portable and practical for Neolithic scribes also doomed its siblings to oblivion. Modern analysis walks a tightrope between skepticism and wonder. Statistical studies of the symbol's repetition hint at structured communication, but without more samples, confidence wavers. Archaeologists meticulously compare the markings to those on contemporary pottery from the same site, searching for patterns that transcend mere artistry. Meanwhile, experimental linguists feed the symbols into algorithms designed to detect linguistic fingerprints. Though results remain inconclusive, the most compelling argument for proto-writing comes from the tablet's physicality. Its flat, smooth surface and orderly lines suggest preparation, not doodling. Someone went to great effort to make this, but was it a ledger, a prayer, or something we've yet to conceive? What lingers isn't just the question of what the symbols mean, but why they matter. If Dispilio represents true writing, it would append the traditional narrative that literacy bloomed first in Mesopotamia. But even if it's only proto-writing, the tablet forces us to confront a deeper truth. Humanity's urge to encode meaning isn't the product of cities or empires. It's as old as settled life itself, springing from the hands of people who built homes on water and left their thoughts floating just beneath the surface of history. Buried in the fertile plains of China's Henan province, the Jiahu symbols whisper of a revolution that may never have happened. These markings, etched into tortoise shells and bones around 6,600 BC, predate the famous oracle bone script by over 4 millennia. At first glance, they seem innocuous, simple lines and crosses, a few resembling modern Chinese characters for eye or sun. But here's where the controversy ignites. Are these the first sparks of Chinese writing, or just ritual scratches with no linguistic intent? The stakes couldn't be higher. If proven to be writing, Jiahu would rewrite the timeline of civilization, suggesting Chinese literacy emerged parallel to, or even before Mesopotamia's cuneiform. The debate hinges on the definition of writing itself. Oracle bone script, used during the Shang dynasty around 1200 BC, is universally accepted as China's earliest full writing system, a complex network of logograms recording royal divinations. Jiahu's symbols, by contrast, appear isolated and simplistic. Some scholars, like archaeologist Garman Harbottle, argue they represent proto-writing, a bridge between abstract symbols and true language. Others counter that the marks are purely decorative or tally-like, no more linguistic than notches on a hunter's stick. The most tantalizing clue, a handful of Jia whose symbols bear uncanny resemblance to later Chinese characters, like a faint genetic echo across 60 centuries. National pride further complicates the puzzle. China's cultural narrative has long emphasized the indigenous origins of its writing system, unbroken from oracle bones to modern characters. The idea that Jiahu's symbols might be its primordial roots fits neatly into this worldview, but risks conflating patriotic enthusiasm with hard evidence. Meanwhile, Western scholars often demand stricter criteria, insisting on grammatical patterns or contextual repetition that Jiahu lacks. The tension isn't just academic, it's about who gets to claim the title of humanity's first scribes. Modern technology offers new ways to scrutinize these enigmatic marks. Microscopic analysis reveals some symbols were carved with fine bone tools, suggesting deliberate craftsmanship rather than casual scoring. Chemical tests show certain tortoise shells were burned after marking, hinting at ritual use, perhaps an early form of pyromancy, where cracks from fire were read as divine messages. Most compelling are statistical studies of symbol recurrence. While no clear syntax emerges, certain marks appear repeatedly in specific positions, like early attempts at standardized notation. Yet the silence of Jiahu's creators is deafening. Unlike the Shang scribes who left detailed records of harvests and wars, these Neolithic farmers left no bilingual texts, no royal decrees, just shells scattered in graves. Were the symbols personal mnemonics, understood only by their makers, sacred codes meant for gods, not humans, or the fumbled first steps toward a system that would take millennia to mature? Every interpretation carries a whisper of truth, but the full story remains locked in those ancient grooves, waiting for a key we might never find. The only certainty is this: on the banks of the Yellow River, long before emperors or dynasties, someone felt the urge to carve meaning into bone, and whether it was writing or not, that urge itself changed the world. High in the Andes, where the air thins and history feels woven into the mountain slopes, the Inca left behind a writing system unlike any other quipu. These intricate arrangements of knotted strings, dyed in vibrant colors and tied with meticulous precision, were once the administrative backbone of the largest empire in the Americas. But here's the twist: quipu isn't writing as we know it. There's no alphabet, no ink, no clay. Instead, information lived in the knots, their placement, their spacing, even the direction they were tied. Think of it as a three-dimensional ledger, where a single knot could represent a tally of lomas, a census of households, or even the movements of stars. For the Inca, who had no need for paper, quipu was more than record-keeping. It was a tactile language, designed to be read by touch as much as sight. Yet quipu's brilliance is also its curse. Without a Rosetta Stone to bridge the gap between knots and spoken Quechua, modern scholars face a puzzle that defies conventional decipherment. Early Spanish chroniclers dismissed quipu as primitive accounting tools, failing to grasp their complexity. But recent breakthroughs suggest something astonishing. Some quipu may encode narratives, myths, laws, even poetry, transforming them from bureaucratic tools into a true script. The key lies in their three-dimensionality. Unlike flat symbols on a page, quipu knots exist in space, their meaning shaped by the interplay of color, texture, and sequence. It's as if the Inca invented a language meant for fingertips, where meaning wasn't just seen but felt. Now shift from strings to textiles, where another Inca enigma awaits: tokapu. These geometric designs, woven into royal tunics and ceremonial cloths, aren't mere decoration. Some scholars argue tokapu functioned as a parallel symbolic system, a visual language communicating status, lineage, or even sacred concepts. Imagine a king's robe as a walking manifesto, its patterns declaring his right to rule without a single spoken word. The most tantalizing theory: tokapu and quipu might be two sides of the same coin, one for the hands, the other for the eyes, both part of an Andean tradition that valued multiplicity over singular scripts. What makes these systems so resistant to Western decipherment is their refusal to conform. Quipu doesn't fit the mold of phonetic writing, and tokapu rejects the idea that symbols must represent sound. Instead, they reflect a worldview where information could be tactile, visual, and communal all at once. For the Inca, knowledge wasn't locked in books. It was carried on the backs of quipu keepers, and woven into the fabric of daily life. Modern researchers, trained to dissect linear texts, are only now learning to read the way the Inca did holistically, with hands and eyes wide open. The lesson here isn't just about lost languages. It's about the limits of our own assumptions. Quipu and tokapu challenge the very definition of writing, forcing us to ask, what if literacy isn't just about marks on a page, but about systems that dance beyond our usual frameworks? Every knot tied, every pattern woven, was a defiance of silence, a way for a civilization to speak across centuries without a single conventional letter. And that's the real mystery, not just cracking their code, but learning to listen in a whole new way. Carved into the stone walls of ancient Byblos, a coastal city in modern-day Lebanon, lies a script that could rewrite the history of Mediterranean writing, the Byblos Syllabary. These 10 cryptic inscriptions, dating back to the 2nd millennium BC, are a linguistic chameleon blending Egyptian hieroglyphic flair with the angular simplicity of early Cypriot scripts. At first glance, the symbols seem familiar. Some echo the graceful curves of Egyptian writing, while others mirror the blocky forms of later Greek linear. But look closer and the syllabary becomes a puzzle wrapped in an enigma. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which handed scholars a bilingual key, these inscriptions stand alone, whispering secrets in a language no one living understands. What makes this script so tantalizing isn't just its hybrid appearance, it's its potential role as a missing link between the writing systems of the ancient Near East and the Aegean. Byblos was a bustling trade hub, where Egyptian papyrus met Minoan pottery and Mesopotamian tin. The syllabary's symbols reflect this cultural crossroads, as if scribes were stitching together a Franken script to bridge languages. Some researchers argue it's Proto-Phoenician, an early ancestor of the alphabet that would later dominate the Mediterranean. Others see hints of Hurrian or another lost tongue spoken by the city's elite. The truth without more texts, we're left with a handful of stone fragments and a mountain of speculation. The corpus itself is maddeningly slim, just 10 inscriptions, most shorter than a grocery list. One tablet, dubbed the Byblos Royal Inscription, bears the longest sequence, 22 signs arranged in neat lines, possibly recording a king's name or a dedication to the gods. Another fragment shows a recurring symbol that might represent gold or divine, teasing connections to Egypt's hieroglyphic system. But here's the cruel twist. Unlike Mesopotamian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs, which survived in thousands of tablets, Byblos' script appears to have been a local experiment, one that flickered out before it could spread. Modern decipherment efforts are like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Linguists use statistical analysis to hunt for repeating patterns, hoping to spot prefixes or suffixes that hint at grammar. Others compare the symbols to later Phoenician letters, searching for evolutionary links. One breakthrough came when a team noticed that certain signs resembled simplified hieroglyphs, suggesting the scribes of Byblos might have borrowed Egyptian concepts, but adapted them to fit their own language's sounds. Yet without a bilingual text or a clear descendant script, progress stalls. It's as if we're listening to a conversation through a keyhole, catching only every third word. The Byblos Syllabary's greatest lesson might be about fragility. How easily a writing system can vanish when it's tied to a single city or trade route. This wasn't some primitive scroll. It was a sophisticated tool, born in a cosmopolitan hub where cultures collided. Yet for all its promise, it left no heirs. Perhaps it was too complex, too tied to Byblos' unique position as a middleman between empires. Or maybe its disappearance hints at something darker, a cultural reset, where new powers erased the old ways of writing to impose their own. Whatever the case, these 10 inscriptions are more than relics. They're a reminder that history isn't just written by the winners. Sometimes it's whispered by the scripts that almost made it. Deep in the steamy lowlands of Mexico's Veracruz state, A slab of stone stands as a battleground for linguists. The La Mojara Stela. Carved with over 500 intricate glyphs, this 2-ton monument dates to the 2nd century CE, a time when the Maya were still centuries away from their iconic script. The symbols themselves are a visual feast. Human figures with elaborate headdresses, jaguars mid-pounce, and abstract shapes that twist like vines. But the real fight isn't over the artistry, it's over whether these glyphs represent the earliest form of the Mayan writing system, or a linguistic dead end spoken by a culture lost to time. At the heart of the debate is the Isthmian script, named for the narrow isthmus of Tehuantepec where it flourished. Some scholars, like the late epigrapher John Justison, argue it's Proto-Zoquan, linked to modern indigenous languages still spoken in the region. Their smoking gun, a handful of glyphs that resemble Zoque words for lord or sky, suggesting the stela might record a king's ascension or a celestial event. But skeptics fire back. The resemblances are vague, and without a bilingual text, the connection hangs by a thread. Imagine trying to reconstruct English from a single billboard with no context. That's the scale of the challenge here. What makes Isthmian especially contentious is its overlap, or lack thereof, with Mayan glyphs. A few symbols undeniably echo later Maya writing, like a shared glyph for day that looks like a blooming flower. But the grammar, that's where things unravel. While Mayan script follows strict syllabic rules, Isthmian glyphs cluster in unpredictable ways, as if the scribes were playing by different linguistic rules. One theory suggests Isthmian wasn't pure writing at all, but a mixed system blending logograms with pictorial mnemonics, less like a sentence and more like an IKEA instruction manual carved in stone. The La Mojara Stela itself adds to the drama. Discovered in 1986 by fishermen near the Aquila River, it depicts a ruler named Harvester Mountain Lord, his face framed by glyphs that may detail his reign or his downfall. One section shows a date corresponding to May 15, 156 CE, followed by glyphs that could spell war, sacrifice, or even a solar eclipse. But without knowing the underlying language, these readings are educated guesses at best. The stela might as well be a ransom note where half the letters are smudged. Technology offers fragile hope. Spectral imaging has revealed faint, previously invisible glyphs along the stela's edges, while machine learning algorithms attempt to map symbol frequencies against known Mesoamerican languages. Yet even AI hits a wall when faced with a script this isolated. The brutal truth is that Isthmian might remain a locked door, unless another stela emerges, one that pairs these glyphs with a familiar language. Until then, the stones of Veracruz keep their secrets, leaving us to wonder if we're staring at the blueprint for Mayan greatness, or the epitaph of a writing system that never got to grow up. Among the ruins of Crete's Phaistos Palace, archaeologists pulled an artifact from the earth that defies all expectations, the Phaistos Disc. This palm-sized clay disc, baked hard over 3,000 years ago, isn't just another relic, it's a linguistic grenade. Unlike linear or Cretan hieroglyphs, its symbols weren't carved, they were stamped. Each sign pressed into wet clay with individual seals, like a Bronze Age printing press. The result, a spiraling sequence of 45 unique symbols, from helmeted warriors to bees, marching inward like a labyrinthine code. No other object like it has ever been found in the Minoan world. No duplicates, no fragments, just this solitary disc, whispering from isolation. Theories about its purpose spiral just as wildly as its glyphs. Some claim it's an astronomical calendar, with symbols mapping celestial events. The bee for summer solstice, the ship for lunar cycles. Others hear the echoes of a sacred hymn, the symbols encoding a prayer to the Minoan mother goddess. More fringe voices even suggest it's a board game, its spiral path meant for tokens. But the most haunting possibility, it might be a one-off, an experiment in writing that died with its creator. Imagine a scribe inventing stamps for efficiency, only for the technique to vanish into obscurity. The disk's singularity suggests it wasn't part of a broader system, but a flash of innovation that never caught fire. Context is the disk's cruelest tease. Found in a basement near Tartaria Tablets, it shares no symbols with Crete's other scripts. The stamps themselves have never been recovered, leaving no clues about how widely they were used. Even the firing of the clay feels intentional. Was this a permanent record, or was it meant to be ephemeral, hardened by accident? The spiraling direction adds another layer. Minoan scripts typically read left to right, but the disk's symbols spiral inward, forcing the reader to rotate it like a cosmic cipher. Modern attempts to crack the code border on desperation. One team claimed it was a geometric cipher, assigning numerical values to symbols. Another argued it's a syllabic script, recording a Minoan dialect. But without a parallel text, or even a single matching symbol elsewhere, every theory collapses under its own assumptions. The disk's resistance to translation isn't just a technical hurdle, it's a philosophical one. What if this isn't writing at all, but a symbolic object, meant to be seen rather than read? A ritual artifact where the act of stamping held more power than the message. The Phaistos Disc's greatest trick might be how it mirrors our own obsession. We project onto it what we want to find: the calendars, hymns, even alien messages, because its very existence challenges the narrative of linear progress. Here was a civilization playing with mass-produced symbols millennia before Gutenberg, then abandoning the idea altogether. Its silence isn't just a puzzle, it's a provocation. Some doors stay locked not because we lack the key, but because they were never meant to be opened. Beneath the rolling hills of Transylvania, 3 tiny clay tablets ignited one of archaeology's fiercest battles: the Tartaria Tablets. Unearthed in 1961, near a Neolithic settlement in Romania, these palm-sized artifacts bear symbols that look unnervingly like early Sumerian cuneiform, despite being 2,000 years older. One tablet shows a horned animal beside rows of stick-like marks. Another, a human figure surrounded by angular glyphs. At first glance, they seem to whisper of a lost European script from 5300 BC, a staggering claim that would rewrite the dawn of writing itself. But the moment archaeologists dared to suggest these symbols might be proto-writing, the academic world split in two. Were they proof of an indigenous European literacy, or an elaborate hoax planted to fuel nationalist pride? The controversy stems from their eerie resemblance to symbols halfway across the world. Some glyphs mirror early Sumerian accounting marks, used for tallying livestock, except the Tartaria Tablets predate Mesopotamia's earliest known writing by over a millennium. This either suggests an impossible cultural connection, spanning continents, or a chilling coincidence in how Neolithic minds independently shaped similar signs. Critics point to the excavation's murky details. The tablets were found in a pit alongside human bones, their context poorly documented. Worse, Romania's communist regime at the time aggressively promoted narratives of ancient local superiority, raising suspicions of planted evidence. The debate isn't just academic, it's a minefield of politics and identity. Yet dismissing the tablets outright ignores their haunting context. The Vinca culture that likely produced them was no backwater. These were sophisticated farmers who smelted copper, traded across the Balkans, and lived in dense settlements. Their pottery is covered in recurring symbols, some bearing uncanny parallels to the Tartaria glyphs. If the tablets are genuine, They might represent a regional symbol system, evolving toward true writing, much like Mesopotamian token counters did before cuneiform. One particularly compelling glyph, a spiral resembling later Minoan hieroglyphs, hints at a vast, interconnected web of Neolithic communication stretching from the Danube to Crete. Modern science offers tools to cut through the noise. Thermoluminescence dating confirms the tablets were fired in antiquity, ruling out a modern forgery. Microscopic analysis reveals the symbols were incised when the clay was still wet, consistent with deliberate Neolithic craftsmanship, but the most damning evidence against the hoax theory. Fragments of similar inscribed tablets were found at other Vinci sites, suggesting Tartaria wasn't an isolated anomaly. If this was a forgery, it was an impossibly elaborate one, complete with a supporting cast of lesser-known artifacts. The stakes couldn't be higher. If the Tartaria symbols are indeed proto-writing, Europe's literary birth wasn't a Mesopotamian import, but a homegrown revolution. It would mean that on the banks of the Danube, Neolithic farmers were scribbling symbols with purpose millennia before pharaohs ruled Egypt. Yet even if they're only ritual marks, their persistence across Vinci sites suggests something profound, an embryonic system of meaning, flickering to life and then snuffed out by time. The tragedy isn't just that we might never decipher these tablets, but that their very existence forces us to confront how much of humanity's first attempts at writing may have vanished without a trace. Every scratch in that clay is a question. Did writing bloom in multiple soils, only for history to remember the victors? In a private Hungarian library, hidden among centuries-old tomes, lies a book that shouldn't exist, the Rongorongo Codex. Its 200 pages pulse with symbols unlike anything seen in European history. Crescent moons cradling dots, arrow-headed characters stacked like ladders, and intricate glyphs that swirl like wind through grass. Discovered in the early 19th century, this manuscript isn't just undeciphered, it's an enigma wrapped in a forgery accusation, tied with the ribbon of nationalist obsession. The moment scholars laid eyes on it, the battle lines were drawn. Was this a medieval relic preserving a lost language, or an elaborate hoax designed to rewrite Hungary's past? The Codex's origins are as murky as its text. It surfaced in Rongorongo, a small town in western Hungary, donated to the local academy by a count who claimed it had been in his family for generations. But here's where the skepticism ignites. The script bears no resemblance to any known European writing system, not Latin, not runes, not even Glagolitic. Instead, its symbols flirt with distant alphabets. Some resemble simplified Brahmi from ancient India. Others echo Dachauer glyphs from Romania's Carpathian mountains. This wild stylistic mix fueled theories ranging from the plausible a Hungarian noble's eccentric cipher to the fantastical, a secret gospel smuggled out of Byzantium by heretics. The most explosive claim, that it's written in a vanished Dachauer script, a pre-Roman language some Hungarians desperately wanted to tie to their ancestry. Yet the Codex refuses to fit neatly into any narrative. Statistical analysis throws gasoline on the debate. When linguists ran frequency tests on the symbols, patterns emerged that defy random generation: consistent word lengths, repeating character combinations, even what looks like punctuation. These aren't the hallmarks of a forgery doodled by a bored aristocrat. They're the fingerprints of a structured communication system. But whose? One team claims the symbol frequencies align with old Hungarian runes, while another insists the vocabulary distribution mirrors medieval Sanskrit. The bitter truth, without a bilingual key or even a clear historical context, the Codex's language remains a locked room with the key melted down centuries ago. The hoax theory isn't without merit. 19th century Europe was a playground for literary frauds, from the Oura Linda book to the infamous Voynich manuscript, which shares Rohunk's aura of impenetrability. The timing is suspicious. The codex appeared just as Hungarian nationalists were scrambling to prove their culture's ancient roots, independent of Austrian influence. Could it be a political weapon disguised as scholarship? The paper and ink tell a complicated story. Carbon dating places the materials firmly in the 16th century, but ink analysis reveals inconsistencies. Some pages might have been retouched or altered long after the original scribe put quill to parchment. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. AI trained on thousands of scripts can't classify Rohunk's symbols into any known family. Spectral imaging uncovered faint underdrawings beneath some pages, suggesting the scribe worked from a template or copied an older source. Then there's the illustration's biblical scenes peppered with bizarre details. Soldiers wielding weapons unknown to medieval Europe, architectural elements resembling Indian stepwells, and a crucifixion where Christ's halo is replaced by a crescent moon. Every page feels like a deliberate provocation, daring us to unravel its contradictions. What lingers isn't just the question of authenticity, but the codex's uncanny resistance to categories. Forgeries usually crumble under scrutiny. Genuine scripts yield fragments of meaning. Rohunk does neither. It stands defiant, a linguistic rebel without a cause, a manuscript that whispers in a tongue no one living remembers. Perhaps its greatest trick is making us wonder, if this is a hoax, why craft something so meticulously baffling? And if it's real, what catastrophic loss of history left it stranded in time? A message without a sender, a language without a people. The Codex doesn't just challenge our ability to read it. It challenges our assumptions about how writing lives and dies. On the banks of the Singapore River, a single weathered slab of sandstone holds the ghost of a lost empire. The Singapore stone, a fragment of what was once a massive inscribed boulder, bears a script that curls and loops with the grace of ancient Indic languages, yet no living scholar can fully decipher it. When British engineers blasted the original stone to clear land in 1843, they didn't just shatter a rock, they obliterated a linguistic bridge to the 10th century Srivijaya Empire, a maritime superpower whose ships once ruled the trade routes from Sumatra to China. The surviving fragment, now housed in Singapore's National Museum, is a maddening tease. Its script resembles Old Javanese or early Sanskrit, but with twists that defy direct translation. Some characters echo the Pallava script used in southern India, while others seem to borrow from Sumatran proto-writing systems. This hybridity is the stone's loudest clue. Srivijaya wasn't just a kingdom. It was a cultural vortex where Indian merchants, Malay sailors, and Chinese envoys collided. The stone likely stood as a boundary marker or royal decree, its text proclaiming laws or warnings to the traders who thronged Singapore's shores a millennium ago. What makes the stone's near destruction so devastating is the historical void it left. Srivijaya, a thalassocracy that thrived on control of the Malacca Strait, left few tangible records. Unlike the Maya or Egyptians, who carved their histories into stone by the ton, Srivijaya's power was built on perishable goods, spices, gold, and human connections. Their documents were oral treaties and ship logs. Their libraries, the memories of multilingual harbour masters. The Singapore stone might have been one of the few permanent inscriptions ever commissioned by Srivijaya's rulers, a rare effort to etch their authority into something harder than rumour. Modern attempts to reconstruct the text are akin to solving a jigsaw puzzle with 90% of the pieces missing. Early colonial scholars made rubbings of the original stone, but these copies are faint and riddled with gaps. Linguists have tried triangulating the script, using related inscriptions from Sumatra or Java. But Srivijaya's dialect was likely a distinct blend of Sanskrit and Old Malay. One tantalizing theory suggests the stone recorded a curse, a royal threat against smugglers or pirates who dared bypass Srivijaya's tolls. Another posits it was a religious edict, perhaps marking the arrival of Buddhism to the region. The stone's greatest tragedy isn't just the loss of its text, but the loss of context. The blast site where it once stood became a dockyard, then a financial district layers of modern development, burying any chance to find companion stones or artifacts that might have clarified its purpose. Today, the fragment sits silent behind glass. Its symbols are a reminder of how easily history can be erased by progress. Every stroke on that sandstone is a footprint, washed away by the tide, the echo of an empire that once commanded the waves, but left barely a whisper on the shore. In a Yale University vault lies a book that laughs in the face of logic, the Voynich manuscript. This 15th century codex, named after the Polish book dealer who rediscovered it in 1912, is a parade of contradictions. Its 240 pages bloom with illustrations of plants that don't exist, zodiac charts with unrecognizable constellations, and nude women bathing in what looks like interconnected green pools. Yet it's the writing that truly baffles, a flowing script of looping characters, arranged in a pattern that mirrors language but defies every attempt to parse it. For over a century, cryptographers, linguists, and even wartime code breakers have assaulted its pages with every tool imaginable, only to walk away empty-handed. The manuscript mocks us. It dangles the promise of meaning just beyond reach. The illustrations alone are a psychedelic riddle. Herbal sections depict flora with bulbous roots, and jagged leaves, species unidentifiable in any botanical record. Some resemble medieval herbals, manuals of medicinal plants, but twisted as if drawn from fever dreams. Astronomical diagrams show overlapping circles and unfamiliar stars, while the infamous biological section features those green bathing women, their bodies linked by tubes to what might be organs or abstract rivers. The most haunting pages, those dense with text alone, their paragraphs curling like whispered secrets across vellum. Modern carbon dating confirms the book's age, but its contents feel untethered from any known 15th century context, as if the author slipped through time to deposit this enigma. Decipherment efforts read like a graveyard of shattered reputations. World War II cryptanalysts, fresh from cracking Nazi ciphers, declared the manuscript their Mount Everest. Early computer scientists fed it into room-sized mainframes, hunting for statistical patterns. In 2019, AI researchers claimed a breakthrough, that the text might be encoded Hebrew. The theory collapsed under scrutiny, another casualty of the manuscript's refusal to conform. Even steganography experts, trained to uncover hidden messages in Renaissance art, found no watermark like clues beneath the ink. The bitter truth, Voynich's resistance might stem from its very design. Unlike historical ciphers, which were meant to be decoded by recipients, this book shows no evidence of ever being read, not by its maker, not by anyone. Hoax accusations shadow every analysis. Skeptics point to the 16th century Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who allegedly purchased the book for 600 gold ducats, a sum so outrageous it hints at gullibility or fraud. Could Voynich be an elaborate Renaissance con job? Its language a gibberish algorithm. The statistics muddy the waters. Word frequency analyses reveal patterns eerily similar to genuine languages, with Zipf's law distributions, a linguistic hallmark present but skewed. The text isn't random, it follows rules. Just rules we can't decipher. This duality is its genius. The manuscript is either the most sophisticated nonsense ever crafted, or a genuine cipher, so advanced it's outwitted centuries of scrutiny. What keeps scholars hooked isn't just the puzzle, it's the manuscript's uncanny familiarity. Flip through its pages, and you'll swear you're on the verge of comprehension, like catching a conversation in a crowded room. The script's curves evoke Arabic. Its word breaks recall medieval Latin abbreviations. Its illustrations tease at lost alchemical knowledge. Yet every path of inquiry dead ends. Perhaps Voynish's greatest trick is mirroring our own minds, making us see patterns that might not be there, convincing generation after generation that the answer is just one more insight away. The book doesn't need to be solved to hold power. Its mystery is the message, buried beneath the ruins of an ancient Etruscan harbor temple. 3 golden sheets shimmer with cryptic promise, the Tartaria Tablets. Dating back to 500 BC, these plaques tell the same story twice. Once in Phoenician, a language scholars understand, and once in Etruscan, a tongue that still guards its secrets. The Phoenician side is straightforward, a dedication to the goddess Astarte by the local ruler the Phaistos. But flip the gold leaf over, and the Etruscan text twists into something stranger. Though it mirrors the Phoenician structure, key phrases diverge in ways that suggest not a direct translation, but a ritual reinterpretation. It's as if we're hearing the same prayer whispered in 2 different sacred languages. One we comprehend, the other tantalizingly just beyond our grasp. What makes these tablets so uniquely frustrating is their false promise of a Rosetta Stone. At first glance, a bilingual text should crack Etruscan wide open. But here's the twist. The Etruscan version isn't a word-for-word match. Some terms align neatly, names of deities like Uni Etruscan and Astarte Phoenician clearly refer to the same goddess. Yet entire passages veer off into uncharted territory, packed with indigenous Etruscan religious terms that have no Phoenician counterpart. Imagine finding a Spanish-English dictionary where half the Spanish words are replaced with Nahuatl helpful until it isn't. The plaques dangle decipherment just out of reach, offering glimpses of meaning while withholding the full picture. Etruscan itself is the ghost in this linguistic machine. Unlike most ancient Mediterranean languages, it belongs to no known family, a linguistic isolate with mysterious roots. Scholars can sound out its letters. They borrowed the Greek alphabet and pass basic grammar, but without living descendants or extensive bilingual texts, vocabulary remains guesswork. The Tartaria Tablets amplify this problem. Their ritual nature means they're packed with formulaic phrases and divine epithets, precisely the kind of specialized vocabulary least likely to appear in mundane inscriptions. It's like trying to learn modern Italian solely by studying Vatican encyclicals. You'll master holy and blessed, but never bread or street. Modern technology has chipped away at the mystery. Computational linguists use the Phoenician text as a scaffold, mapping equivalent segments to reverse engineer Etruscan syntax. One breakthrough revealed how Etruscan employs a cascading modifier system, stacking descriptive words before nouns in intricate patterns. But the tablet's sacred context warps even this progress. When the Phoenician text mentions the statue's foundation, the Etruscan counterpart might describe the celestial footstool of the Lady of Light. Same ritual object, radically different metaphor. Decipherment becomes less about translation and more about decoding an entire cosmology. The cruelest irony lies in the plaque's original purpose. These weren't meant to be puzzles, they were displays of power. The Phaistos commissioned them to showcase his alliance with Carthage, flaunting his bilingual sophistication. Yet today, that very bilingualism underscores how much we've lost. The gold still gleams as it did 25 centuries ago, but the voices that once brought these words to life have fallen silent. Every Etruscan verb we can't conjugate, every deity's epithet we misread, is a reminder. Some doors open just wide enough to show us how much lies hidden in the dark. Among the scattered remnants of Rapa Nui's Rongorongo script, one artifact stands apart: the Santiago staff. This slender wooden rod, carved with a serpentine chain of glyphs spiraling down its length, is no ordinary tablet. Unlike the better-known wooden tablets, which bear dense blocks of symbols, the staff's glyphs flow like a river, their curves mimicking the rise and fall of ocean swells around the island. The difference isn't just aesthetic. Some scholars believe this isn't merely writing. It's a tactile mnemonic device, designed to be traced by finger as much as read by eye. Each groove and notch might have guided the reader's hand through sacred chants, genealogies, or perhaps something far more celestial. A lunar calendar counting the cycles that dictated planting, fishing, and ritual on the most isolated inhabited island on Earth. The staff's glyphs tell a darker story than their graceful arcs suggest. When Christian missionaries arrived in the 1860s, they systematically burned Rongorongo tablets as pagan idols, decimating the island's written heritage. But the Santiago staff survived, possibly because its cylindrical form didn't resemble the flat tablets missionaries associated with heathen worship. What the missionaries failed to grasp was that destroying the tablets didn't just erase symbols. It severed a living chain of oral tradition. Rongorongo wasn't stand-alone writing like Egyptian hieroglyphs. It was a prompt for recitation, its glyphs triggering memorized verses in the minds of expert chanters. The staff's survival is bittersweet. We have the physical artifact, but the voices that once brought its glyphs to life were silenced forever. Astronomical clues hint at the staff's purpose. Certain glyph clusters repeat at intervals, matching the moon's orbit, while others align with the cycles of Venus, a star critical to Polynesian navigation. The most compelling theory comes from parallels with Hawaiian lunar calendars, where notched staffs called Papa Holua tracked months tied to ecological events, the blooming of certain flowers, the arrival of specific fish. If the Santiago staff served similarly, it wasn't just a calendar but an ecological almanac, weaving celestial patterns with the island's fragile ecosystem. This duality makes its loss even more tragic. Imagine a tool that didn't just mark time, but tied it to the blooming of Toromero trees, or the spawning of tuna knowledge as vital as it was irreplaceable. Modern attempts to reconstruct the staff's meaning stumble against a wall of silence. Without living Rongorongo chanters, linguists rely on shaky parallels with other Polynesian languages and fragmentary 19th century word lists. Some glyphs resemble plants and animals, suggesting logographic elements, while the staff's continuous spiral defies conventional reading directions. The cruelest irony: the very missionaries who destroyed Rongorongo culture also recorded snippets of the chants their bonfires erased, notes now used by researchers to triangulate meaning. Their journals describe elders weeping as tablets burned, chanting faster to preserve words before the flames took them. Those fragmented recitations, scribbled in missionary diaries, might be the closest we'll ever get to hearing the staff's true voice. What lingers is the staff's haunting duality, an object both preserved and orphaned. Its survival offers a glimpse into Rapa Nui's intellectual sophistication, proving the islanders didn't just carve moe, they encoded the rhythms of their world into wood. Yet every glyph is also a tombstone for the oral knowledge that once animated it. The staff's deepest lesson isn't about decipherment, but about how fragile human memory truly is. It takes generations to build a system like Rongorongo, linking hand, voice, and sky, and only a few years of suppression to reduce it to beautiful, silent marks on a stick. The Santiago staff isn't just a script. It's a monument to the price of cultural erasure, and a warning etched in wood. Buried in the fertile soil of Transylvania, the Tartaria Tablets don't just challenge our understanding of ancient writing, they threaten to shatter it. These 3 palm-sized clay artifacts, etched with symbols around 5300 BC, predate Mesopotamian cuneiform by over 2,000 years. If their markings qualify as true writing, the birth of literacy didn't emerge in Sumer's grand cities, but in the hands of Neolithic Romanian farmers. The symbols themselves are deceptively simple. A horned animal here, a cluster of zigzag lines there, one tablet even bearing what looks like a stick figure human surrounded by angular glyphs. At first glance, they could be ritual doodles or ownership stamps. But look closer and the implications become staggering. These marks share uncanny similarities with later scripts from Minoan Crete to the Indus Valley. The debate among archaeologists is as heated as a Transylvanian forge. On one side are scholars like Marija Gimbutas, who argue the tablets represent a sacred, old European script, a unified system of symbols tied to goddess worship across the Neolithic Balkans. Their evidence, the symbols' recurrence not just at Tartaria, but at Vinča culture sites scattered through Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, thousands of artifacts bearing the same crescents, crosses, and branching patterns. Opponents counter that true writing requires more than repetition. It needs grammatical structure, context, proof it encodes spoken language. To them, these tablets are no more linguistic than cattle brands or family totems. The divide isn't just academic, it's ideological. If Gimbutas' camp is right, Europe's first writing was born not in service to kings and taxes, but to rituals and Earth Mother cults. Context deepens the mystery. The tablets were found near the remains of a Neolithic hearth, nestled alongside clay figurines and animal bones, a setting screaming of ritual. One theory suggests they were oracle tools, baked in fire until they cracked. Their fractures read like ancient tea leaves. Another posits they were votive offerings, their symbols petitions to deities for fertile crops or safe births. But the most electrifying possibility, these might be ancestral records, early attempts to etch lineage or myths into permanence. Nearby Vinča sites yield pottery marked with identical symbols, some arranged in sequences that hint at syntax. Imagine a Neolithic potter scratching the same zigzag onto every jar, not as decoration but as a maker's mark, a primitive trademark. Multiply that across generations, and you have the seeds of a writing system. The stakes skyrocket when you compare Tartaria to other Balkan finds. 15 miles away, the Vinča below Birdia site disgorged hundreds of inscribed objects, from spindle walls to altar fragments. Some symbols repeat in clusters that mirror early Sumerian accounting signs, but millennia earlier. In Bulgaria, the Grečnica tablets bear nearly identical glyphs, suggesting a regional symbol, dialect. This isn't isolated scribbling, it's a pattern. The troubling question isn't whether these cultures communicated through symbols, but why the system died out. Unlike cuneiform or hieroglyphs, which evolved into full-fledged scripts, Vinča's marks vanish from the record by 4000 BC. Was it invasion, climate change, or something subtler, a cultural choice to prioritize oral tradition over fixed writing? Modern analysis walks a knife's edge between revelation and frustration. Microscopic imaging confirms the tablet's symbols were incised when the clay was still damp, ruling out later forgery. Statistical studies of symbol repetition suggest non-random distribution, a hallmark of structured communication. Yet without a bilingual text or Rosetta Stone equivalent, the tablets guard their secrets. The bitter truth: we may never know if Tartaria's farmers were merely doodling or standing at the precipice of a literary revolution stillborn. Every scratch in that clay is a Rorschach test, one that forces us to confront how much of history's first drafts were written in dust, not stone. The cascadal block doesn't just sit there, it taunts. This sleek serpentine slab, no larger than a hardcover book, carries 62 glyphs carved with a precision that still feels crisp 3,000 years later. When roadworkers unearthed it in 1999 near Veracruz, Mexico, they didn't realize they'd just exposed the Rosetta Stone of the Americas, or at least what could have been. Dated to around 900 BC, the block's symbols don't just predate the Mayas' celebrated script by centuries. They emerge from the world of the Olmec, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica, whose colossal stone heads still watch over the jungle like silent sentinels. But here's the twist: the cascadal block stands alone, no duplicates, no related texts, not even a fragment to compare it to. It's as if someone dropped a single page from a lost encyclopedia and then burned the rest. Dating the block was its own archaeological thriller. Unlike pottery or bones, serpentine lacks organic material for radiocarbon testing. Researchers had to rely on stratigraphy, the layers of earth where it was found, and nearby ceramic shards to pin it to the Olmec's San Lorenzo phase. But stratigraphy is more art than science. A single flood or rodent burrow can scramble the evidence. The block's glyphs offered another clue. Their style mirrors Olmec iconography from carved jades and altars, particularly motifs tied to maize and rulership. One glyph, a U-shaped symbol with dots, appears on later Isthmian script artifacts, hinting at a lineage. Yet this is where the trail goes cold. Finding writing in isolation is like hearing one note of a symphony. You know there's music, but you can't reconstruct the melody. The glyphs themselves are a paradox familiar yet alien. Some depict flora and fauna, insects with delicate antennae, plants resembling maize stalks, even a possible fish. Others are abstract zigzags, circles, and ladder-like forms that defy interpretation. Their arrangement feels deliberate, clustered in rows like early sentences, but without grammatical patterns or repeating phrases. This isn't the dense, standardized script of Maya stelae. It's something looser, perhaps experimental. What's haunting is how the symbols seem to dance between representation and code. A swirl might mean water in one context and king in another, depending on the scribe's intent. Without more samples, we're left guessing whether this was a fledgling writing system or a sophisticated one that vanished before it could mature. The block's isolation poses a darker question. Why is this all we have? The Olmec built pyramids, engineered elaborate drainage systems, and traded jade across continents. If they had writing, where are the other texts? The grim answer might lie in the jungle's appetite. Unlike Mesopotamia's sun-baked clay or Egypt's desert-preserved papyrus, Mesoamerica's humidity devours organic material. Bark paper, deerskin codices any Olmec books would have rotted into mulch centuries ago. Even the cascadal block likely survived only because serpentine resists erosion. But there's another, more chilling possibility. Later cultures might have actively suppressed Olmec literacy. When the Maya rose, they claimed the Olmec as ancestors, but left no record of their script. Was it deliberate erasure, a way to sever ties with the old order? The block's survival feels almost accidental, a whisper spared by chance. Modern decipherment efforts walk a tightrope between hope and hubris. Some researchers, like linguist Terence Kaufman, argue the glyphs record a mixed Zoquan language, still spoken by indigenous groups in Veracruz. They point to symbols resembling later Isthmian script, which Kaufman partially deciphered in the 1980s. Others warn against forcing connections. The block could represent a dead-end dialect, a script so localized it died with its creators. Technology offers little help. AI struggles with single sample analysis, and 3D imaging can't conjure missing context from thin air. The bitter truth: Cascadule might remain a locked box unless another slab surfaces, preferably one with a bilingual caption. Until then, those 62 glyphs stare back at us, a message from the past that refuses to be read. What lingers isn't just the mystery of the symbols, but what their existence implies. The Olmec didn't just carve art, they encoded thought. Whether the block is proto-writing or full literacy, it proves an idea was brewing, one that would later flourish in Maya glyphs and Aztec pictograms. The real tragedy isn't that we can't decipher it, but that we're standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the answer lies somewhere in the fog below. Every stroke on that serpentine is a fingerprint from a hand we'll never shake, a voice we'll never hear, and that's the block's final lesson. Writing isn't just about communication. It's about memory, and how easily it fades when no one's left to listen. Scattered across the arid plains of Jordan, buried in the ruins of ancient villages that thrived over 7,000 years ago, lie fragments of pottery that whisper of a forgotten experiment in human communication, the Yarmakian marks. These enigmatic symbols, etched into clay vessels with the tip of a bone or stick, aren't just random scratches. They form a constellation of repeating signs, crosses, zigzags, and ladders, that appear too deliberate to be dismissed as mere decoration. What's haunting is their age. Dating to the 5th millennium BC, they predate the earliest known Semitic scripts by over 2,000 years. If these marks are proto-writing, they suggest the seeds of literacy weren't sown in Mesopotamia's Fertile Crescent alone, but also in the rugged highlands of the Levant, by a culture that history has barely named. The Yarmakian people left no grand monuments or royal tombs, just these humble potsherds, often found in the corners of collapsed dwellings. Yet their symbols tell a different story. Some designs cluster near the rims of bowls, like labels for contents or ownership. Others appear alongside impressions of grain or woven mats, hinting at a system to track goods in an era when agriculture was still a revolutionary concept. One particularly striking fragment, unearthed near the modern city of Jerash, bears a sequence of nested chevrons that recurs across multiple sites, a possible signature for a clan or trade network. These aren't the sprawling cuneiform ledgers of but they don't need to be. The mark's power lies in their simplicity, the human urge to encode meaning, even if only to say this jar holds barley, or this land belongs to us. So why have these marks been relegated to archaeology's footnotes? Part of the problem is their sporadic distribution. Unlike the Indus Valley Script or Egyptian hieroglyphs, which appear in dense concentrations at urban centers, Yarmakian symbols scatter thinly across rural sites. Without a Rosetta Stone-like bilingual text, or a clear evolution into later scripts, scholars hesitate to call it true writing. Some dismiss the marks as potter's marks, personal doodles, or kiln identifiers. Others argue their very inconsistency proves the opposite, that these were flexible, adaptive symbols, varying by village or purpose, like regional dialects of a visual language. The debate echoes the divide over Vinca symbols in Europe, where one archaeologist sees a tally system, another glimpses the birth of letters. The oversight might also stem from bias in writing's origin stories. Historians long assumed literacy emerged solely in service to bureaucracy, born from the needs of temple economies and tax collectors. But the Yarmoukyan marks defy that narrative. These weren't tools of centralized power. They were the work of Neolithic farmers, people who stored surplus grain in mud brick silos and traded obsidian across the Jordan Valley. If these symbols functioned as proto-writing, they suggest literacy's roots might be far more democratic, sprouting from communal needs rather than royal decrees. Imagine a world where the first scribes weren't palace elites, but shepherds marking their flocks or mothers labeling jars of olive oil. Modern research is slowly chipping away at the mystery. High-resolution imaging reveals tool marks invisible to the naked eye, showing some symbols were incised when the clay was leather-hard, while others were added after firing, a clue to their urgency or purpose. Archaeolinguists map the distribution of recurring signs, searching for patterns that might reflect trade routes or kinship ties. The most tantalizing lead comes from a handful of marks that resemble later Proto-Sinaitic symbols, the script that would evolve into the alphabet you're reading now. Could the Yarmoukyan marks be a distant ancestor, a linguistic missing link washed away by millennia of upheaval? What's certain is this: every time a farmer in Jordan tills a field and kicks up a potsherd etched with those ancient lines, we're one fragment closer to rewriting the story of writing itself. The Yarmoukyan marks don't just challenge where literacy began, they force us to ask what literacy even is. Does it require palaces and priests, or can it bloom in the cracks of everyday life, as fleeting as a finger's drag in wet clay? Until more fragments surface, these silent symbols will keep their secrets, reminding us that history isn't just written by the winners sometimes, it's scratched by the overlooked. Etched into the fragile pottery shards of China's Neolithic Yongshao culture, the Banpo symbols dare us to reconsider everything we know about the birth of writing. Discovered in the 1950s at the Banpo archaeological site near Xi'an, these 22 distinct marks, ranging from simple crosses to stylized fish, date back over 7,000 years. At first glance, they seem innocuous, scratches on clay, perhaps potter's signatures or ownership tallies. But look deeper, and the controversy ignites. Could these humble strokes represent the earliest sparks of Chinese writing, predating the famous oracle bones by a staggering 4 millennia? Or are we projecting the desires of modern nationalism onto the silent hands of ancient artisans? The symbols themselves are a study in minimalism. Some resemble numerals, vertical lines that might tally jars of grain or bundles of arrowheads. Others echo natural forms, a zigzag like flowing water, a hooked shape recalling a sickle. What sets them apart from random doodles is their consistency. The same marks reappear across vessels unearthed from multiple Yongshao sites, suggesting shared meaning. One particularly compelling example is a shard bearing what looks like a plant sprouting from a vessel's base, a possible logogram for crop or growth. This isn't just decoration, it's intentional communication. The question is whether it crosses the threshold from symbolic marking to true proto-writing, a system that encodes spoken language rather than just abstract concepts. The political undertones of this debate are impossible to ignore. China's official narrative celebrates the Shang dynasty's oracle bones as the dawn of its literary tradition, a point of national pride. The idea that writing might have earlier, humbler origins in peasant pottery unsettles this tidy timeline. Some scholars, like archaeologist Guo Moyuo, argued fervently that Banpo's marks were the seeds of Chinese characters, drawing parallels between certain symbols and later oracle bone glyphs. Detractors counter that resemblance doesn't equal ancestry, pointing out that basic shapes like crosses or circles appear independently across cultures. The tension isn't just academic, It's about who gets to claim the mantle of first, a loaded term in the high-stakes world of cultural heritage. What makes Banpo uniquely frustrating is the lack of a clear evolutionary path. Oracle bone script bursts onto the scene around 1200 BC as a fully formed system, with complex grammar and hundreds of characters. Banpo's symbols, by contrast, vanish from the archaeological record for thousands of years. If they were proto-writing, where's the missing link? One theory suggests the Yongshao people used perishable materials, bamboo slips or silk, that rotted away, leaving only these cryptic pottery fragments as echoes. Another posits that Banpo represents a dead-end experiment, like a linguistic branch pruned before it could bear fruit, the most haunting possibility. That we're mistaking the tip of an iceberg for a pebble, that Banpo's marks are just the surviving fragments of a much richer system lost to time. Modern technology offers glimmers of clarity. Microscopic analysis reveals some symbols were incised when the clay was leather-hard, suggesting they weren't afterthoughts, but integral to the vessel's purpose. Statistical studies of symbol recurrence hint at non-random distribution, a hallmark of intentional communication. Yet the ultimate test, proving these marks correspond to specific words or sounds, remains out of reach. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, there's no bilingual text to crack the code, no living language to trace back. The Banpo symbols exist in a vacuum, their meaning locked inside the minds of people who tended millet fields and painted spiral designs on bowls 7,000 years ago. The debate over Banpo forces us to confront a deeper question. Where do we draw the line between marks and meaning? The Inca symbols of Europe and the Armakian marks of Jordan face similar skepticism. But Banpo's stakes feel higher, tangled as they are with China's sprawling literary legacy. Perhaps the answer lies not in forcing these symbols into the writing box, but in expanding our definition of communication. Before stories were etched in bone or clay, they were knotted in string, notched on sticks, or painted on skin. Banpo's pottery marks might not be writing as we know it, but they're undeniable proof that humanity's urge to say, "I was here," stretches back further than we ever imagined. Every stroke on those ancient shards is a voice from the dawn of civilization, whispering across millennia in a language we're still learning to hear. Drowning in the mud of Lake Castoria for over 7 millennia, the Dispilio Tablet didn't just survive, it defied. This waterlogged wooden slab, etched with symbols that ripple across its surface like waves, is more than an artifact. It's a time capsule from a moment when humanity teetered on the edge of literacy. Unlike clay tablets baked hard by fire or stone inscriptions immune to decay, the Dispilio Tablet's existence hinges on a fluke, the oxygen-starved lakebed that preserved it like a prehistoric cryovault. But this miracle of preservation is also its curse. The moment archaeologists lifted it from the mud, the clock started ticking. Wood this ancient, once exposed to air, can crumble to dust in hours. The conservation team faced a nightmare: how to stabilize cellulose that hadn't breathed in 52 centuries without turning it to pulp. Their solution: a months-long chemical ballet, bathing the tablet in polyethylene glycol to replace its water molecules with synthetic reinforcement. Even now, it remains fragile, a whisper from the past that could vanish with a single careless touch. Dating the tablet is its own high-stakes puzzle. Initial carbon-14 tests placed it around 5200 BC, contemporary with the Inca culture's Balkan symbol system. But here's where dendrochronology, the science of tree ring dating, could rewrite the story. If researchers can match the tablet's growth rings to regional oak chronologies, they might pinpoint its creation to within a single decade. Imagine that not just 5,000 years ago, but spring of 3262 BC. The catch: the tablet's edges are eroded, potentially missing critical outer rings. Worse, the symbols were carved after the wood was cut, adding a generational gap between tree death and inscription. It's like finding a modern diary written on wood from the 1800s. The material's age doesn't guarantee the message. The symbols themselves ignite fiercer debates than their dating. Arranged in linear sequences, they echo the Inca culture's later markings, but with a fluidity suggesting something more personal, perhaps a votive prayer or clan sigil. One particularly haunting glyph resembles a branching tree, mirrored on pottery fragments from Bulgaria's Grejnica site, 800 kilometers away. Is this evidence of a shared symbolic language across the Neolithic Balkans, or mere coincidence? Greek scholars, led by archaeologist George Armuziades, argue the tablet's structured rows indicate proto-writing, a system halfway between art and alphabet. Serbian and Romanian counterparts, burned by the Tartaria Tablets controversy, are more cautious. They point to the Inca symbol's sporadic distribution, asking, if this was true writing, where are the receipts, the treaties, the tax rolls? The divide isn't just academic, it's geopolitical. For Greece, the tablet symbolizes Europe's independent path to literacy, separate from Mesopotamia. For the Balkans, it's a fragment of a larger, still murky cultural tapestry they're desperate to reconstruct. What gets lost in these scholarly battles is the tablet's raw humanity. Whoever held this piece of wood 7,000 years ago wasn't thinking about linguistic legacies. They were pressing a stylus into damp timber, perhaps to record a harvest, mark a sacred offering, or teach a child the family's signs. The symbol's intimacy, their slight wobbles, the way one digs deeper than the rest hints at a hand hesitant with newness. This wasn't bureaucracy, it was experimentation. And that's the tablet's real revelation. The birth of writing wasn't a sudden invention, but a slow crystallization, as natural as a river carving its own bed. Every stroke on that waterlogged wood is a voice from the dark, saying, "We were here, we tried." Among the ash-blackened tortoise shells and cracked animal bones of China's Jiahu archaeological site, a cluster of markings stares back at us with quiet defiance. These symbols, simple crosses, etching like lines, and occasional pictographs resembling eyes or the sun, were scratched into organic materials over 8,500 years ago by the Paleogang culture, Neolithic farmers who predated China's dynasties by millennia. At first glance, they could be dismissed as random scoring, the idle doodles of ancient hands, but their deliberate placement near burial sites, on ritual objects, and in repeating sequences whispers something far more provocative. This might be East Asia's first flirtation with encoding meaning. The debate over whether Jiahu's marks qualify as proto-writing isn't just academic nitpicking. It's a battle over how we define the very origins of literacy. The excavation site in Henan province tells a story of layered discovery. When archaeologists unearthed Jiahu's multi-phase settlement in the 1980s, they found stratified evidence of a society in transition, early rice cultivation, bone flutes capable of 7-tone musical scales, and these enigmatic symbols spanning roughly 2,000 years of continuous use. What's electrifying isn't just their age, but their evolution. The earliest marks, 6200 to 5800 BC, are crude, isolated strokes. Later phases show increasing complexity composite signs, combining multiple elements. Even what some researchers argue are primitive logographs. One particularly striking tortoise plastron bears 16 etched symbols arranged in loose rows, their placement suggesting syntactic intent. This isn't static decoration. It's a system in motion, inching toward true writing. Context transforms these marks from curiosities into cultural artifacts. Many inscribed objects were found in graves, often placed near the head or hands of the deceased, as if meant to accompany them spiritually. Others appear on ritual tools, shamanic rattles, divination bones hinting at sacred rather than bureaucratic use. This distinction is crucial. While Mesopotamian cuneiform arose from temple economies, tracking grain and labor, Jiahu's symbols seem tied to ceremony and cosmology. A broken tortoise shell found beneath a dwelling's foundation, its interior etched with a lozenge pattern, might have been a builder's ritual deposit, a Neolithic time capsule, meant to communicate with ancestors or spirits. If so, these marks weren't for the living but for the unseen, blurring the line between writing and spellcraft. The linguistic debate hinges on symbolism versus systematic encoding. Proto-writing, unlike true writing, conveys ideas without directly representing spoken language. Think of highway signs. A silhouette of a deer warns of wildlife without needing to spell deer. Jiahu's marks thrive in this gray zone. Some symbols, like a forked shape resembling the later oracle bone character for mountain Chinese letter, suggest pictorial origins. Others, like parallel lines resembling the numeral 2 Chinese letter, could be abstract notations. The most compelling evidence comes from recurrence. Certain signs appear across multiple artifacts, sometimes combined in ways that mirror later Chinese compound characters. One tortoise shell pairs a wavy water-like symbol with a stick figure holding a tool, echoing the oracle bone method of combining radicals to create new meanings. Recent technological analysis has both clarified and complicated the picture. In 2021, a team using 3D microscopy and reflectance transformation imaging RTI proved many marks were made post-firing, incised into already burnt bone, eliminating the theory they were accidental cracks from divination heating. Even more telling, toolmark analysis revealed consistent engraving techniques across centuries, suggesting trained specialists rather than ad hoc scratchers. But the bombshell came from AI pattern recognition studies in 2023. Machine learning trained on global symbol systems found Jiahu's markings clustered statistically closer to proto-cuneiform token systems than to purely decorative motifs. The algorithm flagged specific sign combinations as potentially encoding nominal phrases, possibly names or titles. The implications ripple across Asian epigraphy. If Jiahu's marks represent a sustained proto-writing tradition, they could be the conceptual ancestors not just of oracle bone script, but of broader East Asian symbolic systems. Korean scholars note similarities to early petroglyphs at Bangudi Terrace, while Japanese ethnographers see parallels in Jomon cord marked pottery signs. This isn't about nationalist claims of first writing. It's about recognizing multiple, parallel experiments in visual communication. Jiahu forces us to confront a radical idea. Perhaps writing wasn't invented once and perfected, but kindled independently in various forms, some flourishing into full scripts, others flickering out like sparks in the night. What lingers isn't just the question of decipherment, but of loss. The Peligang culture vanished around 5500 BC, possibly due to climatic shifts or resource conflicts. Their symbols, whatever they meant, fell silent for millennia until archaeologists brushed the dirt from those first tortoise shells. Unlike Mesopotamian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs, which evolved continuously into modern scripts, Jiahu's marks represent a road not taken, a potential writing system stillborn by circumstance. Yet their legacy might persist. When a Shang dynasty diviner etched the first definitive Chinese characters onto ox scapulae 3,000 years later, they could have been unconsciously echoing those Neolithic lines, proving that even failed experiments in writing leave invisible fingerprints on history. The true lesson of Jiahu isn't whether we can read those marks, but what their existence tells us about humanity's relentless drive to make marks that outlast us. High in the thin air of the Andes, where the past clings to the mountains like frost, the Inca left behind a language without letters quipu. These intricate webs of knotted strings, dyed in vivid crimsons and earthy browns, look at first glance like decorative fringe. But each knot is a deliberate act of memory, twisted into place by specialists called quipu, the keepers of the chords. Spanish chroniclers like Garcilaso de la Vega wrote of witnessing these masters read quipu aloud, translating knot patterns into detailed histories, genealogies of kings, inventories of grain stores, even epic tales of gods and conquests. Yet for centuries, scholars dismissed these accounts as colonial fantasies, insisting quipu were mere accounting tools. Only now, as computer algorithms dissect their mathematical elegance, are we realizing the truth. Quipu might be one of humanity's most sophisticated three-dimensional writing systems, lost to time not because it failed, but because its logic was too alien for conquerors to comprehend. What makes quipu uniquely haunting isn't just their complexity, it's their radical departure from how we define writing. Unlike cuneiform's wedges or hieroglyphs' pictures, quipu encode meaning through variables Western scripts ignore, not spacing, chord tension, even the direction of the twist in each string. A single pendant chord might bear clusters of knots, representing numbers in base 10 positional notation, while its color indicates the subject yellow for gold, green for crops, black for time. But here's where colonial accounts shatter the numerical theory. Jesuit Bernabe Kobo described quipu reciting laws and myths from knot patterns, their fingers tracing subtle variations modern scholars initially overlooked, sub-knots within knots, or chords knotted in pairs like linguistic twins. One particularly vivid record from the 1560s tells of a quipu reader performing a history of the Inca dynasty, his voice rising and falling as he moved from main chords to subsidiaries, as if navigating chapters in a book no outsider could see. Modern technology is finally giving us eyes to read what fingers once knew. At Harvard's quipu database project, anthropologists and computer scientists feed high-resolution scans of surviving quipu into machine learning algorithms. The patterns they've uncovered defy randomness. Certain knot combinations recur too frequently to be numerical, clustering in ways that mirror grammatical structures. One breakthrough came when researchers noticed narrative quipu often use color gradients. A shift from crimson to pale pink might mark a transition between historical epochs, like paragraphs in a chronicle. Even more telling are the knot clusters that appear in non-numerical sequences, suggesting syllabic or logographic elements, the wildest hypothesis. Some quipu might be topographical maps, their chords mirroring the contours of sacred valleys or trade routes, with knots marking settlements or battles. Imagine a civilization so attuned to texture that they could encode landscapes into strings. Yet for all our algorithms, the deepest secrets of quipu may lie beyond computation. Spanish priests noted that quipu didn't just read the knots, they sang them, their chants weaving melody into memory. This wasn't rote recitation but performative mnemonics, where rhythm and pitch acted as metadata. A 2019 study by Andean ethnographers found modern Quechua storytellers still use similar techniques, associating narrative turns with specific vocal tones. It suggests quipu weren't standalone texts, but prompts for oral performance, their true meaning emerging only when touched, voiced and felt. The tragedy of their loss isn't just about unraveled chords, it's the silencing of a whole sensory language, one where history lived in the interplay of fiber, voice, and hand. The most poignant clue to quipu's narrative power comes from their violent suppression. After the 1572 rebellion of Tupac Amaru, Spanish authorities ordered all historical quipu burned, fearing their subversive memories. Only the blandest accounting chords were spared, distorting our modern sample. But in a remote Peruvian village in 2004, anthropologist Frank Salomon encountered an elder who recalled his grandfather hiding a quipu in a cave, whispering it held the names of the ancestors. When they returned, the cave was empty, the strings likely dissolved by humidity. That loss echoes across centuries, not just of information, but of a way to think that defied ink and parchment. Quipu remind us that writing isn't universal, it's as cultural as music or dance. And some melodies vanish when the last player dies. What lingers isn't just the mystery of the notes, but the hum of voices we'll never hear, twisting through time like unreadable chords in the dark. The Rohonk Codex doesn't just resist translation, it revels in the chaos of interpretation. This enigmatic manuscript, with its 200 pages of crescent moons, arrow-headed characters, and glyphs that twist like vines, has long been dismissed as an elaborate hoax. But what if its mystery isn't a flaw, but a feature? Recent linguistic analysis suggests the codex might not be a corrupted form of any known language, it could be a constructed one. An artificial system built from whole cloth. Unlike natural languages that evolve organically, constructed languages, or conlangs, are deliberately designed, often with internal logic that defies traditional decipherment. Think of Tolkien's Elvish or the Dothraki tongue from Game of Thrones, but crafted centuries before such inventions became mainstream. The Rohonk Codex's symbols don't neatly map to Hungarian, Sanskrit, or any of the other languages it's been compared to, yet their statistical patterns are too consistent for random gibberish. Could this be the work of a Renaissance-era linguist playing God with words? The 19th century Hungarian context adds fuel to the fire. When the codex surfaced in Rohonk, Hungary, in the early 1800s, the nation was simmering with nationalist fervor, desperate to prove its cultural independence from the Austrian Empire. This was the era of the Hungarian revival, when scholars scrambled to unearth, or in some cases, fabricate evidence of a glorious past. The infamous Königsberg hoax, where a nobleman forged ancient Hungarian chronicles to stir patriotism, proves how high the stakes were. Into this tinderbox came the Rohonk Codex, its origins conveniently murky, its symbols tantalizingly just familiar enough to hint at a lost Dachshund or pre-Magyar script. Even its donor, a count who claimed it had been in his family for generations, fit the profile of a romantic nationalist, eager to gift Hungary a linguistic relic. The timing was too perfect, the motivations too transparent. No wonder skeptics smelled a rat, yet dismissing the codex as mere nationalist propaganda overlooks its strange brilliance. A competent forger would have mimicked known scripts, like old Hungarian runes or Latin. Instead, the codex's symbols are a chaotic blender of influences, some resembling Brahmi from ancient India, others echoing medieval alchemical notations, even a few that look like distorted Cyrillic. This isn't the work of someone lazily copying. It's either the product of a wildly creative mind, or a genuine hybrid system born at a cultural crossroads. Modern digital analysis adds another layer. Certain glyph sequences recur with the rhythmic regularity of grammatical structures, while the script symbol entropy, a measure of randomness, falls squarely within the range of natural languages. If this is a hoax, it's a mathematically sophisticated one. built by someone who understood linguistic patterns decades before computer science could quantify them. The illustrations deepen the riddle. Nestled between the glyphs are biblical scenes, crucifixions, angels, and what might be the Tower of Babel, but with bizarre deviations. Christ's halo is a crescent moon. Soldiers wield scimitars unknown in medieval Europe. And architectural details resemble Indian stepwells more than Gothic cathedrals. These aren't the clumsy strokes of a provincial artist. They're detailed, deliberate, and eerily cosmopolitan. One theory posits the Codex as a crypto-religious text, crafted by a secretive sect blending Christianity with Eastern mysticism. Another suggests it's a fictionalized travelogue, an early attempt at world building by a nobleman obsessed with the Ottoman Empire's exoticism. Either way, the artistry betrays a depth of thought that transcends simple forgery. What lingers isn't just the question of authenticity, but why the Codex refuses to be solved. Most hoaxes crumble under scrutiny, their anachronisms exposed, their sources traced. The Rongorongo Codex, by contrast, grows more enigmatic the harder we look. Its paper and ink are period appropriate. Spectral imaging reveals underdrawings suggesting a painstaking creative process, and its hybrid symbols resist every comparative framework. Perhaps its greatest trick is mirroring our own biases. Nationalists see a lost Hungarian Bible, linguists see a Kunlang, skeptics see a fraud. The truth might be messier, a medieval art project that outlived its creator's intent, morphing from private obsession to public enigma. Every attempt to crack the Codex says more about us than it does about the hands that made it. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to make us wonder. From the coiled strings of Inca quipu to the ghostly glyphs of the Indus Valley, these undeciphered scripts form a chorus of lost voices that once tracked harvests, praised gods, and etched the rise and fall of civilizations. Each one is more than a puzzle. It's a severed thread in the tapestry of human history. Consider the Rongorongo scribes of Easter Island, carving warnings into wood as their world collapsed, or the Minoan merchants of Crete, whose linear are tablets recorded transactions in a language we'll never hear spoken. Some scripts, like the Jiahu symbols scratched into tortoise shells, whisper of rituals we can barely imagine. Others, like the Isthmian glyphs of Mesoamerica, taunt us with their near comprehension, so close to Mayan writing, yet just out of reach. What's haunting isn't just the silence of these scripts, but the diversity of what they've silenced. The Voynich manuscript's bizarre botany could be a medieval herbalist's fever dream, while the Rongorongo Codex's biblical scenes, twisted with Eastern motifs, suggest a hidden religious schism. The Proto-Elamite Tablets from Iran, dry economic records, yes, but also receipts from the dawn of bureaucracy, proof that writing wasn't just for poets and kings. And then there's the Singapore Stone, a linguistic shipwreck from the Srivijaya Empire. Its surviving fragment hinting at a maritime power that ruled the waves but left no chronicles. This isn't just about cracking codes. It's about reclaiming entire ways of thinking. The quipu knots of the Andes force us to question what writing even means. Must it be ink on a page, or can it live in the tension between strings? The Dispilio Tablet, preserved by a quirk of lakebed mud, challenges the very timeline of literacy, suggesting that Neolithic farmers might have been marking symbols while Mesopotamians were still counting on clay tokens. Every undeciphered script is a door to a parallel intellectual universe, one where history could have unfolded differently if only we had the key. So now we turn to you. Which of these lost voices speaks loudest to your curiosity? Is it the Phaistos Disc, with its cryptic spiral of stamped symbols, or the Cascadal block, a lone Olmec artifact that might rewrite the origins of New World writing? Drop your theories in the comments. Maybe you've spotted a pattern everyone else has missed. And stay tuned, because the story isn't over. With AI, spectral imaging, and a bit of luck, the next Rosetta Stone could be waiting in some forgotten excavation site, ready to shatter our assumptions once again. The past isn't done talking. We're just learning